Today is June the 10th, 2010, and this is the start of an interview with Mr. Henry Skoczylas at the RSVP offices of Catholic Social Services. Mr. Skoczylas is 81 years old. His date of birth is November 16th, 1928. Mr. Skoczylas currently resides at 33433 Shaner, apartment 321, Sterling Heights, Michigan. My name is Dave Brousseau, and I will be the interviewer, and Mrs. Ann Bartlett will be the videographer. Mr. Skoczylas, would you state for the record the branch of service that you served?
United States Army.
All right, let's start with you giving us a little background on your family and where you lived and where you went to school.
Well, I'm the 13th of 15 kids born on a farm not far from Mackinac City. There's a little town that US 31 goes through, Pellston. We went to school in Pellston. And
That's where you were born to?
I was born in, it's in Emmett County. I was born in Emmett County, so it was we were about 5 miles from the school.
Where did you go to school?
Pellston.
Pellston? Were you drafted or did you enlist?
No, I enlisted. And I living with my brother in Chicago at the time, and being young and wanting to see some of the world, I thought that would be a good place to start would be with the military.
How did you get from Pellston to Chicago?
Well, I had a brother living in Chicago. He had, I'm not sure, he had a family. He was married and had 2 kids. And I was in Detroit first because I had a brother in Detroit. And I don't remember how I ended up in Chicago, but I was there for about 6 months, and then I decided to join the Army.
Were your parents still alive at the time?
Yeah.
Were you the youngest or the middle part of?
I'm the 13th.
You're the 13th.
The last baby that they had was a live birth, but he died shortly after birth, about 5 minutes maybe. And I remember, I was about 4 years old. I remember my dad being a Catholic family. My dad baptized them and did the thing with the little bundle of straw with the smoke, the benediction or whatever it was, and blessed them and took them to the local cemetery. And back in those days, because he wasn't officially baptized, he had to be buried off-site. And I keep looking at that cemetery when I go up there, and I can't find, it doesn't seem to exist anymore. I think they eliminated that. That was pretty prejudicial, that if you weren't properly officially baptized, you couldn't be buried in a cemetery proper. I mean, that was a Catholic rule for quite a while. I don't know if it's still.
Okay, when you enlisted, where did you go to basic?
Well, I was in Chicago. They sent us to Fort Lewis, Washington, in the state of Washington, near Tacoma. Any Army camp that's called a fort is a permanent kind of thing, and if it's a camp, it's temporary. So Fort Lewis most of the buildings of a fort are all brick or stone. The camps are all wood. And Fort Lewis is kind of like Fort Knox and whatever other forts are. It's near Tacoma. We went on a train. Took about 5 days in January. I was going through Montana. First thing I was going to ask somebody, I don't know, the train engines going through Montana and some of the heavy snow, the wheels on it were about 10 feet high. I remember trying to reach up to touch the top of it. Even though they had a blade in the front to shove the snow off, the wheels were big, I guess, to help get through the snow, but they were really huge. then somewhere down the road they stopped and switched engines, and the engines with the big wheel would go back to the beginning of the route and catch the next train, I guess.
What can you tell us about that time? The war was just over. What were your expectations in getting in the service? To get a skill or get some training, or?
Well, I'd had two brothers in the Army. Both were in combat. One was a prisoner of war for a year, and the war was over, so it seemed like a safe time to get in. I wanted some adventure to see what it was like to get away from where I was raised and grew up. I mean, you know, when you're born to a family of 15 and the average income is $500 a year, there isn't a whole lot of frivolity going on.
Do you remember basic? Anything about basic?
There's a picture here somewhere on a machine gun. No, basic to me, everything I did in the Army, I thought was you know, I heard all these stories and talking and stuff, but I thought it was a piece of cake, personally.
It may have been a lot different just because the war was over.
Could be, yeah.
I don't recall talking to anybody telling me that basic was a piece of cake, so it might have been different a little bit.
Well, it depends how you grew up. You remember going on the farm, and most of the implements were hand tools, shovels and hoes. I mean, you had horse-drawn equipment, but especially getting wood ready for the winter, you know, cutting and sawing logs by hand with a crosscut saw, and when they could, you had a buzz rig kind of an affair, and it would run off of the rig would run off the rear wheel of a Model T. You had to turn the wheel backwards because you needed the rear wheel to be toward the...
What did they call that, a band saw?
No, it wasn't. It's a big circular saw about 3.5 feet in diameter. A buzz saw is the way it was called when I was there.
Okay.
And we used that. You needed a good 30, 35 cords of wood because most of the winter is, you know, 15, 20, 30 below zero. And snow was 20, 30 feet sometimes. That's up in Pellston. That's notorious for, that's below the straits, about 20 miles from the Mackinac Strait. And we slept upstairs. There was no heat upstairs. We had to get upstairs and go out on the porch and climb up the ladder to get into the house. But you didn't fool around. It was brutal cold. We had these called feather ticks, I think. They're made with goose feathers, where you got to strip
Goose down?
Goose down. That's one of the jobs we had after school. Every one of us had our allotted amount that you had to strip anytime you had some free time. But that did keep you warm.
Those were really warm, big pillow-like, full of the down, and
right.
Boy.
Call them feather ticks, I think.
Was there anything in basic that stuck out in your mind that you can remember to tell us?
I don't know, to me, I thought basic was pretty easy. I don't know, maybe it's because of the hard way we grew up on a farm. Anything after that seemed like a piece of cake. I don't know what anybody was complaining about.
Where did they send you from there?
Well, ironically, when I enlisted for the shortest term possible because I didn't know if I'd like it or not. At that time, the shortest enlistment was 18 months. Well, by the time you spent 6 months training and everything, there's only 12 left, and you know, with the Army can't send you to school or do much with you because in fact, after I enlisted for that 18 months, that 18-month enlistment was eliminated because they realized that, you know, when I was at Fort Lewis, where I took basic, there must have been, I don't know how many different companies there, but everybody's, you know, with an 18-month enlistment, is roughly 6 months used up to going through basic and travel time and all that. And can't do much with you. You don't have enough time left to be invested in. So what I did is, for that, they sent me to school, get this, to learn to do EKGs, electrocardiograms. So I was an EKG technician for a while, and they sent me, and you know, you gotta remember at Fort Knox when the when everybody graduated at the same time, there must have been a couple of thousand recruits. They didn't know what to do with them. So after I did the EKG school, they sent me to where's that place in Pennsylvania? It's real in the Civil War. It's really historic.
Gettysburg? Is that what you went? Where you went to Gettysburg?
Mention another one. Where that big cemetery is, there, from there.
Oh,
It's a huge cemetery.
Yeah.
You got to drive through it with a car. You can't.
yeah,
Anymore.
it's where they had the Battle of Gettysburg.
Yes.
That huge cemetery, yeah.
Well, it's around York, Pennsylvania, in that area, Gettysburg area. But anyway, the name's not necessary.
Well, anyway, I was sent there and assigned to the medical clinic to do EKGs for both military and for the dependents. And I also did the BMR, which is basal metabolism. And that was easy going, you know. It was pretty easy. I was kind of amazed that I was doing all that stuff coming off the farm. I just only went to about the 5th grade. And I decided, they came up with a plan that anybody that had only 6 months left on their enlistment, you could waive the 6 months and re-enlist for 3 years and pick your theater of operation where you wanted to go to. So I thought, you know, this Army is, to me, it was so far like a piece of cake, like I said. So they waived the, you got discharged at one table, and your middle table they gave you the $200 discharge amount, and the third table they swore you in for 3 years. And I wanted to go to Europe because my brothers had been in the battle in Europe, and not long after that they sent to I think New Jersey. I don't know, in New Jersey they have a Camp Kilmer and Camp Dix, and one is the port of embarkation and one is debarkation, but I don't remember which is which.
Yeah.
But anyway, I got sent to Germany, went over on that ship that you got here. That was one of the new big transports. The average ship during that time was 400 to 500 feet long. This is 750 feet. And I don't think it was its maiden voyage, but boy, this is in January we're going across. And January is when it has the worst storms. The sailors on the boat says, man, you're in for a real ride. I'm telling you, them waves are so big, that ship would stand straight up. And then it would come down and hit the water, and man, it would just rumble and shake, and you thought all the rivets were going to pop out. Man, I made more. Bless my heart. And then they put us below decks because it was really bad, and locked all the hatches. And you know, as the ship goes down, you're going with it. I mean, you can't believe something that big could be tossed around like a feather.
How long did it take you to get over there?
I think it took somewhere between 5 and 7 days. I don't remember for sure.
Valley Forge was the name that we were looking for
Valley Forge, right
in Pennsylvania.
There's
Yeah.
a big hospital there, and I did cardiographs and basal metabolism at Valley Forge. They also had a mental ward there, and I helped out, something I never knew before, I helped out in the mental where they give them electric shock treatments. One lady was a colonel's wife. I don't know any other in the background, but one of the things when they turn the power on, you got to hold their head. They got a like a 4-inch diameter piece of wood with about a 1-inch foam on it. They put under the neck, and you got to bear down on her head as hard as you can. And they turn the power on. Her body just shakes and stiffens. They say if you didn't hold their head, they would, the shock would cause them to snap their neck. I was worried about that. I wanted to make sure I wasn't responsible. So anyway, that was kind of interesting. But I wanted to get overseas where my brothers had been.
So where did you go when you were overseas then? Where were you assigned?
Well, I was assigned to, they had an organization called the Constabulary, which would be plural for constable, which is basically a peace officer. The city of Augsburg, which had a population of about 350,000, and his main claim to fame was it had a big Messerschmitt fighter plane factory, which was almost a mile long. They'd put in raw material at one end, and out the other end would come an airplane, fighter plane. And the Messerschmitt was really a top-notch fighter. I guess it was right up there with the British Spitfire. We were constabulary, like I said, which is plural for constable, which is a peace officer. We had two of us, each in a Jeep, patrolling certain areas, watching for I don't know, we're supposed to keep an eye out to see if there was a lot of contraband was flowing around during that time. And there was a lot of illegal booze, like what used to be called moonshine. And most of the moonshine places were in places that you would think nobody, you know, they would pick the worst places there are because nobody, like a pig pen where there was a yard full of pigs and had a pen. In the middle would be a moonshine. And I mean, that was really gross, but the idea was that people wouldn't think that anybody would be making moonshine.
Right.
And moonshine was sold on the black market for cigarettes. Cigarettes was the coin of the realm. I mean, you could do more with a package of cigarettes or a carton of cigarettes. You could damn near buy an apartment house with a few cartons of cigarettes.
So what was your job assignment there?
Well, we had a particular route to patrol, just looking out for supposedly, you know, any gangs forming. You know, it was still the Nazi thing was still pretty popular, and there were gangs forming, but that didn't last long. Not, maybe 6 weeks, and then they eliminated that whole thing and made everybody into a kind of a combat outfit, and that's when I was sent to a little town named Eschwege for wheel vehicle mechanic school. And when I got done with that and got back to camp, and there was, when I left, there wasn't a tank anywhere in sight. When I come back, man, there's a whole yard full of Army tanks. The new tank, the M26, had a 90mm gun to counter the German 88s. And it looked like a fine piece of machinery. And then as soon as I came back from wheel vehicle school, I was at camp maybe 2 weeks, and I went back to the same school to go through tank mechanic school. When I left the school, there wasn't a tank in sight. There was nothing to do with tanks. When I got back there, man, they had all the cutouts and the tank stuff laid out. I couldn't believe they could do all that. I was only gone maybe 2 weeks. And I went to tank mechanic school for, I don't know, 26 weeks, 22 weeks, I think. But that new tank, which was supposed to be the answer to the German, you know, it had a 90mm gun to answer to the German 88, because the 88 was a super good weapon. It was also used as an not only an anti-tank gun, but an anti-aircraft gun.
Mm-hmm.
But that tank was designed and built here in Detroit, I'm sorry to say. And I mean, it's a really long, sad story. I mean, it was the worst feckless piece of junk ever designed by man or beast. I mean, for new, you know, new equipment.
Now, were you actually assembling the tanks there, or just
no,
mechanic?
They came assembled from the United States.
So your was just the maintenance on the tank.
The biggest problem, well, it goes back. I was looking through the manual. I'd like to look through the manual, look at all the specifications, you know, the horsepower, the displacement, and everything. And it had oil coolers and water, you know, the radiators. It was a V8 Ford engine, 8-cylinder, 500 horsepower. Same tank that was in the original M4. The original World War II tank was the M4, and it would only weigh about maybe 30 tons, and it had a smaller gun, 75mm. They had short barrel, was used kind of like artillery, and then the long barrel, they had 76mm long barrel, which was more like a rifle for using for anti-tank. And this tank, looking through the book, it said that it had a 500 horsepower engine, the same as the original tank, but it said 100 horsepower is used up just by running all the fan belts and all the fans. It had 4 8-bladed fans and a stack of oil coolers and a regular water radiators back to back, and then the upper and lower, there was 2 fans, 2 8-bladed fans on each side with a drive shaft coming off the engine. And you know, pulleys to accommodate all the belts. It said the belts alone took 100 horsepower. Then the transmission was a kind of an automatic transmission. You had to shift it manually, but there was no clutch. So you could shift up or down. It worked pretty slick. That took another 100 horsepower. The tank itself, according to the book, weighed something like 50 tons. So I said, this sounds great. There's still 100 horsepower on the fan belts, 100 horsepower on the automatic transmission. Added 30 tons of weight to it. We should be having a lot of fun with this thing before it's over with. And that was a real disaster. I never, you know, I'll admit I cussed my religion away at least a dozen times on them things.
Those were Ford flathead V8 engines?
Ford, yeah, V8 engine.
Yeah, the flathead V8 engine they had then.
Oh, it had overhead cams.
Overhead valves?
The camshafts were overhead. The original car engines, the valves are inside the block,
right.
But these had overhead, as most cars today have overhead valves. But it was just underpowered, you know. They added all this extra stuff on there and took away the horsepower. And like I say, when the Russians blockaded Berlin, our regiment had 72. They were considered heavy tanks because they did weigh. They could weigh practically 50 tons. But out of a regiment of, I believe, 72 tanks, only 3 would start. Now, those 3 had a hard time getting to the exit gate.
Wow.
Oh,
Good thing the war was over, eh?
Oh, I ain't kidding.
Who was your tank commander?
Well, I can't remember. Each tank had a commander. You know, the guy was usually a staff sergeant, and the company had 22 tanks.
Well, where did George Patton Jr. show up?
Well, when I first got to Germany, I was assigned to where I was assigned to, and I got in the barracks. I wasn't real disciplined about, you know, all the military. And apparently, I was assigned to these barracks, which originally was with the Jeeps patrolling. It was a constabulary. I walked down the hallway, and there's this second lieutenant. I just sort of walked by and going, "Soldier," and he said, and gave me a couple of commands. You know, I turned around. I didn't know what I did wrong. He said, "You see these bars? They were gold bars of the second lieutenant, and the silver bars of the first lieutenant." He said, "You see these gold bars? You salute them every time you walk by them." You know, he was really giving me a kind of a spiel. And I didn't sass back. I was scared. I didn't know what I did wrong. And he said, "I'm Lieutenant George Patton Jr. And every time you see these bars, you salute them. You're not saluting me. You're saluting these bars. And these bars give me the authority." You know, he gave me a pretty good lecture. I'm going, "Yes, sir." And I didn't get any other punishment for that. But, you know, it was just plain. That was my first introduction. Then he was shipped out not long after that. He went back to the States for more training or officer candidate school. Well, he's already a second lieutenant. So I don't know where he figured in during the war, but he sure let you know what the officer bar was.
How long did you serve there then? What's Eschwege?
Eschwege was where the schools were, the ordnance school for wheeled vehicles and tank vehicles, which is about 180 kilometers north of where Augsburg was.
So how long were you there?
I was there 2.5 years. But in the meantime, I got yellow jaundice, cirrhosis of the liver. After we got booster shots, about 40,000 guys came down with cirrhosis of the liver. Hepatitis it's called, but basically you turn yellow, you know, your urine turns like coffee without cream, your feces turns like ashes, pardon that. But there's really no cure for it, although they did come out with some new medication. And you had to take 6 capsules 3 times, you know, every 8 hours. and the stuff would burn in your throat and in your stomach like heartburn. It was so bad. You know, I begged and pleaded, give me some kind of something to drink after that pill and do something, because I said, I ain't taking any more of them. I don't care if I go to prison or what. But they just, so I think it was on the midnight dosage, the girl, it was like six capsules. She gave them to me, I went like that, and she walked away, and I put them on the night table. And when the morning nurse came by and saw those things on there, man, you'd have thought the whole damn world came to an end. They were screaming, yelling. I called all the doctors. I missed the dosage. Well, I didn't know this was an experimental drug, and they were keeping track of, you know, minutia on everything, on who reacted and what the reactions were. And I screwed up all of their documents, and they gave me a big lecture, and they were going to court on my back half dead, and they're going to court martial me. I said, so court martial me, all right, you know, maybe I'll get someone. Anyway, I was telling them I can't take them pills anymore unless they, you know, do they know what, I mean, they themselves probably never took them. I mean, I can tolerate a lot of stuff, but then we made a deal where they would give me what is that stuff to drink, that kind of a pink stuff?
Pepto-Bismol.
Like a
Like
Pepto-Bismol?
Pepto-Bismol stuff to drink after I took the pills. And I was in a hospital in Munich. You know, Munich is a big major city there, and the United States Army had taken over one of the main hospitals there in Munich. And one of the doctors there was a German civilian. Well, he had been in the military, but he was a nice, handsome-looking guy, like 6'2", and spoke pretty good English. And I was telling him, I said, this hepatitis is really weird stuff. I said, you could be sitting in a chair, and the chair is burning, and I don't know, I really don't know if you'd get up and move or not. I mean, I'm sure you would, but I mean, it's hard for me to believe that you would. And I was telling him this. He spoke pretty good English. He said, jawohl, that's what happened in Africa. He said, everybody thinks Montgomery, you know, beat Rommel in Africa. He said, hepatitis beat Rommel in Africa. We had 300,000 cases of hepatitis.
Mm.
I was really like lambasted. I didn't know what to say. I said, wow, that's a lot of hepatitis. And we had other conversations after that, but we got to be pretty good buddies. He seemed like a pretty nice guy. And eventually my blood test came back saying that, you know, it took nearly 6 months from the time I first got sick till I got, and even then, before you go back to regular duty, they send you to a place called Garmisch. Garmisch is a playground of Europe. It'd be kind of like Las Vegas or something, but it's in the mountains. They had everything you could want, skiing and skating and canoeing and volleyball, and you mentioned it. I can't think of any activity that they didn't have there, because after being in the hospital 6 months, your body's muscles and everything, you know, are like fatigued and out of shape, and it was there like 5 weeks. And the thing they had up on the mountain was a cross, and from the camp, the cross looked to be about a foot high. We would walk a certain distance up this mountain, and every week, and the idea was after 6 weeks, you should be able to walk to the top of the mountain, and that would be like the graduation. And once that took about 6 weeks, and that was a real struggle. When you got up there, I was amazed. That cross was like 12 feet tall, you know, it was huge. But from down where we were, it would look like that. So that was kind of a target thing to get you back in shape, to get you back to your, you know, I went back to my company in Augsburg, and by that time, I think that was already my 3rd year, 2.5 years I was over there. Anyway, I wasn't there long, and it was time for me to, you know, they come around, they wanted you to re-enlist, but I said, no, I found out when I liked what I did, I liked everything that happened to me, but I'm not going to make a career of it, and went back home.
What was your designation then?
Because I had gone to wheel vehicle school, I went to tank mechanic school. I don't know, I had the mechanics, they call it an MOS, military occupation specialty.
Were you a sergeant yet?
Yeah, buck sergeant, I think. or had one rocker. I don't know, that was staff sergeant. Although I was court-martialed when I was at the school, so that I lost one. This is really silly. They had a mess hall. They had 2 floors to it, upstairs and downstairs. And if you went upstairs, it seemed like there was never as much food upstairs as there was downstairs. And man, I was hungry, you know. I tried to keep in shape, but they had a corporal who was a director. When the line upstairs got too long, he'd direct the line to go downstairs. When downstairs got too long, they went upstairs. Anyway, I guess I physically, actually, they say in the court-martial that I physically accosted him. I don't remember physically pushing him, and went to the downstairs line because that's where the most food was. And I was court-martialed by this, he was a major. It was the lowest court-martial there is, which is a summary, I think, court. I was kind of scared. I didn't know I did anything that bad. You know, I always thought I was a pretty good soldier. And he gave me a real lecture. And I already knew that my scores at the school, I was a valedictorian. So he's giving me a lecture. He's going to call the records office and see what kind of a student I was. He said, if your grades aren't any good, aren't very good, then you're done. I'm putting you up for dishonorable discharge and kicking you out of the Army. He said, you accosted that corporal? He said, I don't care if he's only got 1 stripe, you got no business laying hands on anybody. I said, well, I don't remember doing that. I said, the guy could have told a story that went above and beyond what I actually did, but he wouldn't buy that. So he called the school office to see what my grades were, and he's going, okay, thank you. He said, well, your grades are pretty good, so we'll leave you, but you're going to get six weeks of detention, you know, to the barracks, and $250 fine, with X amount taken out each payday. And what I got done, I didn't know, I didn't want to have any demerits, but I got out of that pretty good.
That was a pretty costly meal.
That was.
So what happened after that?
Well, I continued to school. When the class ended, we went back to our outfits. And when I left my outfit, like I said, there wasn't a tank in sight. When I got back, there was 22 tanks, heavy tanks, with a 90mm gun, all brand new, fresh painted, and even then I had reservations about what was going to come, because when I was reading through the manual, and the same engine, 500 horsepower that the 30-ton tank had, and they got 100 horsepower lost on a transmission, 100 horsepower on all the fan belts. The tank was just underpowered. I mean, I can't remember, it was 22 tanks in the company, and I can't remember ever going on a road march or anywhere. I mean, just tank after tank would break down. I mean, you just couldn't keep up with it. There was no, even at the regiment, they couldn't keep up with it. It was, you know, I gotta admit, I cussed my religion away more than once. But I was just glad to get out of there. The sorry thing was, this was a brand new tank, newly designed to counter the German big tank. That German tank, by the way, with the 88mm gun, weighed around almost 80 tons. It was huge. I mean, I've seen one that was disabled when we were at a place called Grafenwohr, which is a big German training camp, equivalent to probably our Fort Knox. You know, it was about 30 kilometers long, 20 kilometers wide, and they had to do live fire of tank guns, artillery, all kind of stuff. So we were stationed there. And
Do you know who built the tank?
built right at the Detroit Arsenal, right here
Wow.
on Van Dyke. You don't see much of us. M26, if you get a chance, research it if you can. That's designation was M26. But the point is, if you had the same 500 horsepower engine that used to be in a 30-ton tank, Now you got 50 tons, you lose 100 horsepower on the fan belts according to their own damn manual, 100 horsepower on the transmission. I mean, where's the brains? And I wanted to talk to somebody high up in the hierarchy. I was really mad. I wanted to talk to the main general on there and tell him to call the tank plant in Detroit, because I knew a little bit, because I'd worked in Detroit a little bit, and find out who the Looney Tune was that come up with this whole damn thing. Lucky that we never attacked or accosted the Russians. You know, that Berlin was blockaded, the Autobahn was blockaded, the river, the canals, everything, and that's when they went to the aircraft. They delivered food to Berlin by aircraft. They got that down to a science where they could land a plane, unload it in 30 seconds, and it would take off, and another plane would land. There was a plane landing every 30 seconds. So the basic stuff, sugar, you know, flour, I guess, canned goods or whatever, whatever would keep the population going. That went on for almost 9 months.
Wow.
Well, about the time that you were going to be getting out of the service, isn't that when the Korean War started then?
It actually did. I came back to the States in 1950 in July. I think around July, the Korean War started. And I thought, oh crap, you know, what's going to happen? They're going to freeze all discharges, which they did. They froze, in other words, they suspended all discharges, and everybody was extended automatically another year. And there was, you know, no way out. It was like redrafted right on the spot. I was at Fort Knox at the time. I was cadre for a while training recruits. Now this is the strangest thing you ever hear, that I to this day ponder it. In a way it was good, in a way it was bad. Every fort, like Fort Knox, Fort Lewis, Fort whatever, is a permanent camp. All the buildings are brick and stone and everything. The camps are all basically all wood, because they were thrown up in a hurry to be used for the duration of the war and then go back to civilian life. So Fort Knox had this, the building, the three big brick 3-story buildings in a row, which are mainly barracks that's where our bunks were. But the first building was like the headquarters building, and they had most of the officers and all that in there. And they had, the last building was the power plant. It had the facilities for the hot water, for heating. You know, in the summer you didn't have to heat them, and it ended up getting cold. They had the boilers for heating the buildings, and the boilers were fed with, they were coal fired, and they had these what do you call these augers that feed coal into the furnace. I was assigned there temporarily to keep these boilers, you know, going, making sure they always delivered the coal. The coal was like crushed, so it would go, you know, the auger could handle it. And I was glad I didn't have to go to Korea. I didn't want to go to Korea, and I ended up spent the rest of my Army time running these boilers in this building. I was kind of insulted, but at the same time thankful, because they wouldn't give me any damn relief. I mean, I wanted to go to town. I wanted to go to Louisville one weekend at a time, and I guess you wouldn't have to be there personally. You know, you could fill the hoppers up with the coal, but the main part was pulling the clinkers out of the auger. You know, it builds up a lot of clinkers inside the furnace. And that's how I finished my time. I was a coal digger.
Were those the red brick buildings at Fort Knox?
Yeah, brick. Kind of red, more orange than red.
Yeah, I was there about 10 years later, and at that time they built some like cinder block buildings, you know, in addition to those, and for the newer trainees and so forth, you know. So
did you end up spending another year then?
Yeah, when the Korean War broke out, all discharges were not only frozen, but everybody was extended for another year. So that war broke out in, I think, around July the 20th of 1950. You can check on that, but it was 1950. And I spent another year. I got out finally in October of 51. Like I said, I was cadre for a while training recruits, but then I don't know, I was complaining to somebody, they said, well, they looked at my record and they seen that I went to wheel vehicle school and tank mechanic school, and they wanted somebody with some mechanical inclination to run these, you know, these boilers, keep the heat going. As speculative as it sounds, it's better than being in Korea.
Oh, for sure.
Because I was temporarily, during that time, I was temporarily assigned to West Point. And we were doing 3 funerals a day, and they were burying the dead 2 deep. And the average life of the second lieutenant was supposed to be like 11 minutes, and the first lieutenant was 13 minutes. The guys coming back from Korea, it was vicious, it was bad. And it was pretty solemn, but that's what I did at West Point. That, plus the other reason I was there was every year at West Point they have something they call the country fair. They have a little department or detachment of everything that there is in the Army, light weapons, heavy weapons, you know, bazookas, a quartermaster, and I was there. There's no range there where you could fire a tank gun, but they did fire blanks, and that dirties the barrel up really bad, you know, that black powder. So my main focus was, I was with the group that was letting the cadets fire these. We take the tanks kind of off site, but they would fire blanks to learn, you know, to transverse the, you know, the turret. You can transverse the weapon up, the elevation up and down, all that. So that was my main job. But in between, we filled in as pallbearer. One day you'd be a pallbearer at the funerals. One day you'd be a flying squad. And then the third specific was honor guard, because every funeral has an honor guard, has a firing squad, and has a pallbearer.
And all those took place at West Point, all the funerals and burials were conducted there?
As far as I know, any family that wanted their deceased member to be buried at the cemetery at West Point, all they had to do was request it. Now, they were running out of room. Now, that's 50 years ago, so I don't know what they've done since then, but they were already complaining about not having enough room. I was sorry to see, you know, all these guys, just graduated from West Point, all of them bright and beautiful young men, and just like cannon fodder.
Mm.
How did you wind up with that assignment?
What?
How did you wind up with that assignment?
I have no idea. I often wondered about that. I had no way of knowing. It was a nice campus. It was a nice duty. We had, I don't know, I was looking at these things.
Well, you probably were well thought of at Fort Knox, and they asked for, you know, certain number of people from a particular detachment or company or whatever, and they gave your name, and you were then sent there on, I guess, a temporary assignment basis for, like you say, that period of time.
My original assignment at Knox was cadre. You know, cadre is, you know, guys that train recruits and give lectures and do all the, you know, all that stuff has already been prepared years ago and just updated, because by that time they were starting to get rid of the M1 rifle, which was the, you know, the mainstay of the Army, and coming out with that newer one. I don't know what they got now, but the M1 was considered, you know, the classiest weapon ever built for firepower, accuracy.
So did they try to get you to re-enlist?
Yeah, they did. I told them, I said, I'm going to take a year or 2 off and see what civilian life is like, and then you can always re-enlist. I said, you guys will always be around somewhere, so. But I didn't ever plan on re-enlisting.
So you're separating now from the service. What was the first thing that happened after you separated?
Well, the first thing that happened after I separated, I have a brother in Detroit that he'd been in the Army, he'd been a prisoner of war, and he had been, ironically, a machinist And when he got drafted, he was working at the Packard plant as a thread grinder on the crankshafts of engines that Packard was building for the British Spitfire fighter plane. So you'd think he had a pretty, he was drafted several times, but each time he got a deferment on account of the job he was doing. But eventually, they took him anyway. He ended up being in Patton's army, and that big push that Patton had, a whole bunch of them were taken prisoner. He was a prisoner of war for about almost a year by the time the war ended. Here's another thing. We got a notice from the army, because I was home during that time. I hadn't, when my brothers were in the service. We got a notice from the army that he was missing in action. And then got another notice that he had been wounded, which, you know, my mom was a real religious person. She prayed night and day. I guess it helped. And so he's first of all missing in action, then you get a word that you're wounded, and then another confirmation that, or vice versa, first he was wounded, then he was missing in action. So all things go through your head, you know, like he's bleeding to death somewhere in a trench. Then we eventually got a notice that he was a prisoner of war, but that took several weeks before that was established. When he came home, because I still had that Purple Heart that comes in a real pretty box, you know, and the lining in there is like purple color, and it's like velvet almost. So I was showing him, I said, we got a Purple Heart on your behalf, and that you were wounded, and I said, you never wrote or nobody else ever said anything, because he didn't write that off, and we did get, during a year's time,
Okay.
we would get letters, but they were few and far between. They had those victory, they call them victory letters. It was a letter and an envelope all in one piece. You didn't have a separate letter. You wrote on the envelope, it'd be the inside of the envelope, and lick all its places and fold it all together, and it was a one-piece thing. So I was asking him about, I even showed him, in fact, he took the Purple Heart with him because he lived in Detroit. He said he can't think, he said, man, I can't believe it. He said, he was in Patton's outfit, infantry. He said, I was crawling through some barbed wire, and he said, my pant leg got caught, and he said, I remember I scratched my leg on a barb, and it was bleeding, and he said, a medic came and put a Band-Aid on it. He said, that's the only thing that ever happened to me where I shed any blood. He said, you know, Patton liked to give out a lot of medals. He liked his soldiers to get a lot of medals. He said he got a Purple Heart for getting a scratch. So that was, you know, we had a big laugh about that.
Different. Did you ever return to your home on a furlough, like your mother's house, while you were in the service? The reason I'm asking, I can remember as a youngster seeing the folks in our neighborhood have they were like small flags in the window, and they'd have like a star for each of their sons that were in the service, and then if one unfortunately had been killed in combat, you know, it would be a
gold star.
like a gold star or whatever. And this one family had 3 sons, and they had a longer flag because they were draped downward, you know, and they were not like an American flag. They were a special, like a victory type flag or something, you know. I don't know the exact name of what it was called, but did your mother have something like that she displayed?
I think we did. We had in the main window 2 stars. I think it was, well, a gold star was if you lost somebody, you know, in battle.
Yes.
And a silver star, I remember we had 2 stars because they had 2 boys in combat at the same time. But Joe was in the 7th Army and Stan was in Patton's, whatever army that was. But I was surprised that Stan got drafted because he was, you know, usually during the war, if you got a skilled trade and you're working on especially grinding the threads on the end of the crankshaft for the Spitfire engine. That's pretty high up there. But when I got out, I was out 2 days. I went to visit, I stopped in Detroit to visit my brother, and he had a good point. He said where he worked, because he was a machinist. He'd been a machinist before that. He said, where I'm working, he said, they're going to be hiring a guy. We need somebody for a drill press operator with the ability to possibly become a lathe hand, you know, after you did the drill press for a while. And I didn't have any other skills other than what I got, you know, and then going to Army schools. And I was thinking about getting a job with a car dealer or a car repair place, but then I was kind of negative about that. So I took the job. He said, now get this, I'm home only one day. And it's like talking to him at his house on a Wednesday. He said, you got to be to work Monday. I said, man, I'm just getting out of the Army. He said, get all that crap, you never know battles. You never know battle, you never fought nothing. I said, well, that's true. I said, I needed a little time to get, you know, re-civilized. He said, well, it's a good job. He said, after you're on a drill press a while, you can learn to run a lathe. So the opportunity was too good to pass up, so that's what I did. I went and I worked the drill press about 3 months, and they put me on a lathe. I don't know if you know anything about machines, but
You sure do.
But they were a manufacturer of hydraulic pumps and motors. All the tolerances were like 1/1000th of an inch or less, plus or minus a half a thousandth. And so I was really off only 2 or 3 days as a civilian when I went to work. But it was a good opportunity because I eventually I went to Macomb College and took all the courses they had there in hydraulics, and I was a hydraulic pipe fitter for the last 15, 20 years. And I ended up at GM Tech Center, and they had a little division there that they built machines for themselves and for other companies. Everything on a car that spins or turns or oscillates or vibrates or whatever, it has to be balanced. And these machines are so, now with computerized especially, they can find out where the point of imbalance is, and like in the case of needing to remove some metal, you know, they have drills in the right spot, it'll drill out so many grams of metal.
Right.
Or if it needs to be added, they have spot welding, the one that most you don't see much of anymore on the old two-wheel drive cars that had the long drive shaft. I don't know if you ever looked at one, but they would maybe have a little piece of metal somewhere. I always wondered, what the hell is that there for? You know, don't seem to fit. It don't seem. And that's actually, if they had to add metal, they would spot weld it on there in the case of a drive shaft.
Right.
But in the case of a crankshaft, if they had to remove metal, you see some holes in some of the journals, or there's removing some metal to balance it. But everything is, you know, the crankshaft, the camshaft, the wheels. So I worked at the Tech Center for the last 10 years. I could have stayed longer. I turned 62, and I thought, well, hell,
Did you work for GM then at the Tech Center, or did you still
Yeah.
work for Chrysler?
I worked for GM.
I see.
But prior to that, I worked at the Chrysler Missile Plant. That's another thing. They had the Redstone and Jupiter missile. I went down to Huntsville, Alabama. Met with von Braun, and they built them missiles right here at 16 Mile and Van Dyke, including welding what they call the barrels. You know, the aluminum, the Jupiter was the bigger one at 105-inch diameter, and these barrels of aluminum would be automatically welded. But they had perfected the way what it had to be done in order to do that welding.
When did you start your family after you got home?
Well, I'm ashamed to say I can't really remember the exact date.
Well, you ended up getting married.
I got married, had 3 boys. My wife eventually got sick, and she was in a nursing home and a board's home for about 6 years at home on 10 Mile near Hoover. Just wasted away to nothing. I don't know if she weighed 69 pounds. I don't even know what the condition is called.
When you were in Germany, were you able to stay in touch with your family?
Yeah, because my sister, who's still living, but she's in a nursing home in Harbor Springs, her and her husband, they were local there, they married, they had 7 children. They bought the old homestead, the farm that I grew up on, and they had built a little house from Ma and Pa, on a 40, that was 160 acres, or they added more to it, but my dad and my mom, they built a little house for them, and then they had 7 kids, and my brother-in-law passed away a couple years ago. My sister, Stacia, she's still living. She's in a home, and again, like I say, in Harbor Springs. She's been there going on 10 years. She's totally mute. She's pretty healthy. She eats good. You look at her, she don't look, sick or anything, but I haven't heard her talk, and at least every time I go up there, I visit her, and I don't get no reaction, no response, and haven't heard her say a word in the last 5-6 years.
Is any of your other siblings still alive?
Yeah, I have a brother in Flint that he worked at GM Buick at Flint for 31 years. Prior to that, he sailed on the Great Lakes for a couple of years. He was an oiler. Everybody is an oiler at some time, I guess. But he spent 31 years and retired. He's still living. And then I have a sister on the far west side. I should have brought that thing with me. She's got a real strange condition. I can't even pronounce the medical condition. That it's like it's like some kind of a fungus grows around your heart, and this fungus doesn't allow nutrients to be processed through to your cells. And she's still mobile, but she's not that healthy. It's got a name. I had the name. I was going to bring it, but I didn't know I was going to need it. So there's my brother and my 2 sisters I got, and a brother. So there's 4 of us still.
Do you get to see them very often?
Well, yeah, I see my sister on the west side a couple of times this year. I was there. My brother in Flint, I seen him last year. We don't see each other that much, and every time I go up north, I go to Harbor Springs to visit my sister, the one that was, her and her husband, in other words, bought and moved back onto the old homestead and continued to have cattle, and the main crop was always potatoes. And potatoes, need to be sprayed for bugs, and that's always a big, getting all that poison. And back in the days when we were kids, get this, you have a 5-acre field of potatoes, and they would mix up in a barrel blue vitriol. Blue vitriol is a pretty color, but whatever other poisons there were, and you take a pail and you'd make a brush out of wild fern. You'd cut the fern and then tie it with binder twine, make a kind of a brush. You'd go with the pail and dip in the bucket and shake this poison on every potato plant. Now you do that over a 5 or 6 acre field.
Wow.
It takes a long time. Then it rains that night and washes everything away, so you got to go back and do it over again. But the only thing about that is that killed the potato bugs, that were on top of the leaves. But the main killers were on the underside of the leaves. These little, I don't know, they call them gnats or something smaller that you can't hardly see with your eye. There's a name for it. Now, when they came out with the power sprayer, they had these spray nozzles that were not only spraying on top, but sprayed underneath the leaves of the potato plants. But when we did it by hand, the only thing we could do was do the tops, and that was a long process. I don't know, eventually we always got a pretty good crop of potatoes, and the potatoes were the main crop as far as the money crop was concerned. The government buys a lot of them, they store them in these big warehouses, it costs a lot of money. They have to refrigerate the warehouses, and I think it all started after the potato famine in Ireland, where all those, 1 or 2 million people died because the main crop was potatoes. It's the only thing they grew, and they got that potato famine. So the government gives these potatoes away every year to most of the schools that have a food program and other facilities around the country that feed aged people or welfare cases or whatever. They make good use of them because they don't spoil after a year, but they do have to maintain a certain level of humidity and temperature. And there used to be a warehouse there in a little town here where I grew up, where my relatives still live in Levering. Levering is about 18 miles south of Mackinac City. If you go down US 31, and there was a big potato warehouse there. But I see lately they asked somebody what happened because it's been empty for a few years, and the government didn't need it anymore or abandoned it.
You brought some pictures. You want to tell us a little bit about these? This,
That was the ship that he crossed the ocean on.
This ship is 750 feet long. It's 2.5, I got it right here. 750 feet, equal to 2.5 football fields.
Right.
That was amazing. I mean, I've never been on a, I went on a ship, a little boat going across the straits to Mackinac Island, and it was huge. You could walk from, and this was the latest in troop transport. Prior to that, the average ship was 450 to 500 feet. And it was a big argument because the German submarines were so vicious and accurate. You got 4,000 or 5,000 guys on there. As that thing sinks, it's blown out of the water. It's a big loss of life.
Right.
Especially when they.
what was this?
I have to think that was in Germany from the look of the building. I don't know for sure. I can't place it except possibly Germany.
Is that you on the left or the right?
You're right.
Can you get that?
Yeah, there's not a copy of that in here.
So you're on the right.
That's right.
And is there something written on the back of the original?
No.
We don't have the original
Oh,
on that
okay.
one.
And this must have been you and one of your favorites.
Yeah, but that's an old World War II tank. That ain't the damn things that I cussed my religion away on. I can tell by the suspension.
Yeah, that was in Fort Knox in '51. It says on the original photo.
Yeah.
Fort Knox, 1951.
You want to turn that one around and zoom in on it? Is that you standing in front of it?
What?
Yes.
Okay.
Now this tank, I don't know, maybe the newer one. I see the gun barrel looks a lot thicker than this one. This is the old World War.
Yeah, that new picture you have, that says Augsburg, Germany, 1949, with the occupation forces.
Which one?
This one right here. That's what it says on the back of this
Oh, that's the
photo.
same picture?
Yes. This is the original. It says Augsburg, Germany, 1949, with the occupation forces.
That's probably true.
Why don't you turn that one around so we can see it?
But looking at the suspension system, this looks like the old World War II tank, not the new one.
Okay.
I'll tell you the other thing with that new tank. This is a kind of a long story, but you might want to hear it. This is Fort Lewis, Washington, basic training, machine gun fire.
Right.
Is that box in the way?
No, it's fine.
It's January 1947.
Okay.
This is at that George Patton Museum in Kentucky. That was our patch. We used to call it the Circle C Cowboy.
Did you ever meet Patton?
No, I met his son, Lieutenant.
Well, I would imagine he was dead before you
I
got.
think he was dead before I got
Yeah.
there.
Got it?
Yep.
I watched all the movies on him. I don't know, he had a different philosophy. His philosophy was, say you're gonna attack some village or town and you possibly could lose 30,000 guys, let's say, were killed and wounded. Now you could do it piecemeal and a little bit at a time, lose 30,000, or you could do it his way, do it in 24 hours and lose the 30,000 and don't, you know, way it makes sense. Why tire everybody out? Why use, you know, there's a name for that, like attrition.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't, in a way, I think his idea was, even though a lot of people, you know, call him a butcher and everything, but war is butcher anyway, any way you look at it.
You had another story about the tank?
Oh yeah. The new tank had automatic transmission, which, well, it wasn't automatic, it was semi-automatic. You could shift it manually, but you didn't have a clutch. But the problem with that thing was, every time you were driving and it shifted, the damn belts would come off. Especially the ones on the oil coolers and the water coolers. Now, put the belts on, you know, you got this shiv, a pulley with four shivs on it. You got to loosen the bolts up, shove the thing over, get the belts back on, pull the pulley back, pry it back with a bar, tighten the bolts down. And this went on and on and on, and all these belts, I was begging for new belts. Now, these tanks weren't that old, so the belts should have been good, because they're Gates belts, but you know, they got the wires through them, you know, little cables. And these belts were rolled, when they roll off, it peels some of the rubber off, so a lot of them had, you know, empty spaces, but we were using the same belts over and over. I don't know why we couldn't get a new belt. I was screaming to high heaven and talking to the company commander, talking to the ordnance guy. Nobody seemed to be interested. And that problem was so bad that, like I say, every time it shifted, the belts had gone. I tried different tension. You know, look in the book, you're supposed to, you know, put a tension on them and depress it 2.5 centimeters or something. Tried every combination there was. And eventually 2 guys, civilians, came from Washington, from the ordnance depot in Washington. Now get this, you know, the bolts, 4 bolts that hold the joints together, I got holes drilled in their heads to put lock wire on. So the belts never stayed on long enough to even bother putting no lock wire on it. So if I ever run into one where the belts don't jump off, we'll lock wire it, but, because I was like the main mechanic. So these guys come from Washington and want to know what the hell is the problem. He looks in there, he says, "No, no wonder you don't have no lock wires on them bolts." I said, "No kidding." I said, "Why would you want lock wires on them? The first time it shifts, them belts are going to jump off, and you got to, you know, get them back on. You just can't force them on. If you do, you're going to ruin them even more." And we had a kind of a nasty exchange of the other thing. These pulleys, you know, to get the belts on, you gotta turn like a lead screw, and you gotta turn that thing forever to move the pulleys over to where you can get the belts on without stretching the heck out of them. Then you gotta turn this lead screw thing there was a pitch of a thread, maybe, I don't know, 18 threads to the inch, because it was kind of and to get at the head of where the screw, where it's got 4 flats on it over a wrench, is buried by all kind of other equipment. You can't get at the damn thing. And he's saying, well, you can't, he's telling me, well, you can't put them belts on there without moving the pulley over, get it where it's supposed to be. I said, you're right, I agree with you, but I said, look at where the end of that lead screw is. You can't get a wrench, you can't get pliers, the only thing I can do is put a pipe wrench near the end where I know that it's going to affect it. Well, you shouldn't do that. I said, well, you show me. I said, you're a high, I really insulted him. I said, you're a high-paid, well-dressed guy, you got a fancy suit on. I said, I'll give you my fatigue jacket to help you. And get down there, you show me, because I'm not too bright. And you show me how the hell to do this thing, because this stuff is driving me crazy. I'm going to blow one of these tanks up and get the attention of the generals or somebody. So he gets down there, and he really got down there, and he was kind of apologizing. He said, boy, I didn't know it was like that. I didn't know. Anyway, no matter how I screamed, no matter what I tried to do, I couldn't get nobody to pay attention, nobody to do anything, and we had more downtime because of the belts not staying on. Like I said, every time it shifted, the belts would come off. It don't matter. So we're going to France, somewhere in the French zone, well, it's still in Germany, but in the French zone, because we used to go to the French zone, and we used to go to another part of the French zone. And we're going down the Autobahn, and the Autobahn is real nice, and all along the Autobahn is nothing but woods, so I made sure that my maintenance truck was the last vehicle in the column, and I got in the back of it, and along the road was all woods, and all these belts that I had, over 100 sets of belts that probably been on and off a dozen times, stretched, a lot of them had the rope on. I was pitching these belts into the woods. I wanted to make sure there was no vehicles behind me. I didn't want anybody to see me doing this. That's a court-martial offense. I could have been charged with all kind of bad stuff, mayhem and God knows what, all losing war. I pitched all them damn belts out, and when we come to a bivouac, not only our company, but the other company, everybody's complaining about belts. Well, you got to reuse your old ones. I said, don't have any old ones left. I said, we used them all up. We threw them away a long time ago. And this ain't no bull. Some colonel come by and wanted to know why all these tanks are, like grounded, stationary, can't run. They got no belts on. I don't know who he called, but the next day, I think it was, a little airplane like an Army plane that's a spotter plane called an L-5. I guess it can carry a couple hundred pounds. Man, it was MPs blocked off the Autobahn. That little plane landed down, and they come out 3 boxes of all new belts in. And man, we put the new belts on, and never had another belt jump off. And even no matter how it shifted, I couldn't understand what was wrong with the original belts, other than their age. But the tanks weren't that old. I never understood to this day. But I had to get rid of them and prove that we had no other belts. And I was afraid of getting court-martialed. You mean pictured being shot, being a traitor?
This might be a good time to ask you this question I have that's been bothering me here for a half an hour. You talk about all these times where you got yourself in trouble and court-martial, and I see one of the medals you got was a good conduct medal. How did that transpire?
Probably whoever read the record didn't look at it.
I mean, was there something?
I don't even remember any kind of a ceremony getting the good conduct medal. I have no recollection of that. I tried to be conscientious. I tried to do, a good job. But, you talk to the higher ups and they don't listen. Especially all them civilians, I was really sassy with, because I figured they can't do much harm. They could write up a bad report if they wanted to. But I thought maybe they'll get to somebody who sees it and will question it and maybe get some action. But it was the sorriest time of my life with them damn belts.
Henry, that's a very common dilemma in business, not only in the service, but in business. People don't listen, can't seem to get your point across. it's hard to bridge different levels.
Right.
If you were a colonel or a general, they'd probably listen to you, otherwise,
I was hoping that if General Patton was around, I was gonna try to get to him and see, first of all, who designed this tank. It was designed to counter the German Mark IV. The Mark IV had the big 80, you know, the famous 88 on it. And I know it was wartime and they were trying to come out with a new tank that would counter the German big tank. So they probably didn't spend as much time and as much engineering as they should have. But they didn't know that that something like a stupid belt would be that kind of a problem. I spent 90% of my life of putting belts on, rolling them back on. Eventually, like I say, I never put lock wires on, didn't do anything, because you know, the next time it shifted, the belts are going to come off. And yet, after we put, get this, after we put the belts on, I talked to somebody in ordnance, and they said, well, the original belts might have been like dry rotted. They were in storage a long time before they were ever put on the tank. He said, these belts weren't necessarily they were brand new, but they might have been in a warehouse for 10 years. Because when I put the new belts on, I was going to test them out. I shifted that thing up and down, jerked it everywhere I could, and couldn't make a belt come off. I said, glory be, hallelujah.
What, you know, during the Second World War and shortly after, they had a lot of synthetic rubber that they used for tires and things, and
right.
they could have even been made out of that. And then, as time went on, they got the good rubber back into production and started making them out of a good rubber that wouldn't stretch a lot and become distorted and so forth.
I don't know to this day what the answer is why these new belts would stay on and the old ones would just, the minute, and you know, like I say, the tank would shift manually without a clutch, so there was a certain jerk to it, but you could tighten them damn belts, adjusted them every way imaginable, leave them loose, leave them tight, leave them midway, do something, but nothing worked. Man, it just drove me crazy. I was ready to blow up every damn one of them and risk going to Leavenworth, and then I don't know, they'd probably hang here.
well, Henry, thank you very much for your sharing with us everything that you've told us. Appreciate it very much.
Okay, thanks. Is this mine?
Yes, that's yours. Thank you so much.
Okay.